Well, hello everyone. I want to welcome you all to the Are You Minding Your Business expert webinar with Mark Hayes from Size Up. This is Ron Kresha, the operations officer for Golden Shovel, and we are so happy to have Mark with us today to talk about how to grow small businesses in your communities using data. So a couple housekeeping items. We are recording this and we will be sending out the recorded link afterwards so that you can review this. And if you want to get a hold of us, I'll include information in that email so that you can contact us. The last thing is, if you have questions throughout Mark's presentation, please type those in the chat in the right-hand side of your panel, and we'll relay those to Mark as he goes through his presentation. So with that, Mark, once again, we're happy to have you. You have a great audience today. Over 50 people have signed up. So take it away, Mark, and I look forward to hearing the presentation.
Sure. Thank you for that, Ron. I am excited to be here this morning. Hopefully everybody is thawed out. I know a lot of the country got a ton of snow. I'm here in Tennessee, and we've been without internet and power intermittently, but someone above wanted us to be able to do this presentation, and I got my internet back like a half hour ago. So I'm excited to run through this to talk about, economic development, what it is that you do as economic developers, and how small businesses are important. So I'm titled, Are You Minding Your Small Business? There's my contact information, which I'll drop at the end. And let's talk about how important small businesses are to our local and our global economy. So are you minding your business? And more importantly, minding your small business? We'll start with first a definition of economic development, because this will play into my entire presentation. So I had to click away from there. What is economic development? It doesn't have just one definition. This is one that I thought was good, and since this is my presentation, I have the power to make that decision. So we're going to go with the definition that kind of suits everything we're talking about the rest of the day. Economic development: efforts that seek to improve the well-being and quality of life for a community by creating and or retaining jobs and growing incomes, therefore growing the tax base. If you asked 100 economic developers what it is they do, they'll probably say job creation. Honestly, if you asked just a civilian in the community what is it that they do, they'll probably say job creation for economic developers. So that's one thing we know we do. But growing that tax base is obviously a very important thing too, because it improves quality of life in itself. So knowing these are things that we're supposed to do it as economic developers, because they're the definition of economic development, let's figure out where the average economic developer is spending their time. So this is an actual economic developer juggling a clock, or 3 clocks to be precise. And we'll see in the first clock, how are they spending a third of their time? Well, obviously we have to be spending a third of our time in recruitment, because that's how we bring jobs in our community, is we go out and we find companies that are going to bring our community jobs. And then secondly, we're going to spend our time with recruitment, because we've got to find jobs to bring into our community. But with that third clock, we're going to go ahead and do recruitment as well. And while not everybody is guilty of this, this is really, at the very least, the perception of the community that you live in is probably that you spend your time recruiting new business, and maybe not so much with current business, because that's typically, quote, someone else's job, the Chamber of Commerce or whoever that may be. But as an economic developer, if your job is to create jobs and to increase the tax base, is only doing recruitment something that makes sense just to meet your job's needs? Well, did you know that small businesses account for more than half of the jobs in the United States? It only makes sense that more than half your time be spent on assisting current and future small businesses, right? The more you know. Well, let's look at our same clock now. So same economic developer, we're going to drop the third clock of recruitment and put, this is how we're going to spend a third of our time in small business. But if more than half of the jobs created in the United States are by small businesses, wouldn't it make sense that at least half of our time is spent on small businesses? So we're going to take the ootment out of recruitment, and we're going to replace that with small business there. You can see how tech savvy I am, guys. Not anyone could do these things on PowerPoint. So here are 3 reasons why it's important to go ahead and start paying at least some attention to small business. The first is technology. See this robot in the background? I got him to put a 1-up. That's how good technology is going to be in the future. But in all seriousness, technology is going to kill jobs. And I say that actually as its future tense. Technology is currently replacing and just completely getting rid of jobs. And the irony to that is some of the manufacturing jobs that, over the past 20 years, or the past 100 years even, that economic developers have brought into their community to create jobs, those are the first jobs getting replaced by robots. So jobs that are currently getting replaced without any argument really are jobs that are repetitive in nature. So if it means, tighten this screw, put this bolt here, place thing from A to B, whatever the case may be, those jobs are already replaced. And if they haven't been yet for whatever manufacturing we're talking about, they're going to be replaced extremely soon. Jobs that aren't currently being replaced, to a degree, are positions that depend on personal interaction and that work with different impact on another human being. So when we're talking about bringing new companies in, we need to be thinking more about these type companies where a robot can't really feasibly do these things. So factors such as dexterity, like what's needed for a heart surgeon versus someone to screw in a light bulb, are very important. But if you watch enough, TV these days, you're actually seeing robots doing surgeries now. So that's probably going that direction too. In healthcare, you're going to see more and more robots doing things that really human beings can't do or aren't as good at. And then secondly, the ability to persuade, negotiate, or think creatively. Right now, robots aren't even close to being able to think creatively, which is good. Even Watson, that super smart computer that can win Jeopardy 1,000 times in a row, he can't think creatively. He's not putting A and B together to make something out of C. The data has to already be in there, obviously. So those are jobs being replaced and in the future going to be replaced. So let's look at a map, which this was one of the most surprising things I came across when I was building this presentation. This is the most common job by state. And I had no idea how common a job truck driving was. I mean, I know every time I get on the road, I see them and they're always in two different lanes and they drive next to each other and they drive you nuts. But that's not their primary job, to drive you nuts. They're actually taking goods somewhere. But you see, probably in your state, if you're watching this, there's a strong chance that a truck driver is the most common job in your state. You also see things like retail clerk, customer service reps, primary school teachers. They'll obviously always be around, and I don't see a school teacher being replaced by a robot. And most people would say, well, neither is a truck driver. It takes a human being to drive that. But welcome to the autonomous vehicle. Right now, it's basically been perfected for a small vehicle, for just me and you driving around. We could pretty much do this autonomously, and it's going to be done that way as soon as costs come down, when people start getting more of these, and different regulations obviously have to be passed and whatnot. But the self-driving car is a thing, and it's definitely the thing of the future. Let's equate that to now trucks. Why, as a company, if I'm JB Hunt, why wouldn't I say all of my trucks are now going to be autonomous? Because why would I pay somebody a salary to do something that now a machine can do, and a machine can do, quite frankly, more effectively? And when you compare humans and machines, computers are faster, they're more accurate, they're less costly, require no healthcare costs, require no retirement, don't need to be paid, they have no breaks, and they can work 24/7. Other than that, humans are much greater. So there will be no creativity in that truck, but you don't need any creativity to drive a truck. You simply need to get goods from point A to point B. And this is going to hurt a lot of jobs when these things become autonomous. And do you have something in your community where these people, these tens of thousands of people can actually get a new job because they can't drive a vehicle anymore? I mean, it's a very real question and it needs to be asked. The second thing we were looking at is retail. So we all know what Amazon's doing to retail. Obviously, it's hurting retail pretty badly. But look at something like what grocery stores are doing now. This is actually, from the Walmart website, the Walmart app. So what we've seen in the last 5 years is everything kind of going towards the U-Scan, which, if you don't know what that is, it's when I am the cashier for my own stuff. I simply scan it through, I put it in the bag, and I get out of the store. That's killing a job right there, obviously, because there was a cashier doing that job. So now, like at my local grocery stores, whether it be Publix or Walmart or Kroger, there's probably one employee per, I'd guess, somewhere around the 6 to 8 cash registers. So we've cut out, an eighth of employees just doing this, retail basic level work. But the point is, the machines and technology have cut these out. And what's even kind of sadder about that is that's not quite good enough for the grocery stores. Like Walmart has created this Walmart app now where actually you just grab a scanner and you scan with your phone the barcode of all the stuff you buy. You have your credit card attached to the app, and then you just walk out of the store. So you actually are paying for these things as you put them into your cart. You never do any checkout process, and you just leave the store, requiring absolutely no employees to help you out at that point. So really, everyone in that cash register, that was one of the top jobs in some states, they go away. That job doesn't exist anymore. So what are they going to be doing? They've obviously got to find a new skill or a new job. And I can see a lot more than grocery stores going towards technology, obviously, because it, cuts costs. And then a third thing, this was actually in December. I was reading a couple different headlines about how Black Friday performance was. And in-store Black Friday shopping, it was a negligible difference from just a regular day in-store. Obviously, profits were up, but if you compared it to the last decade, Black Friday shopping is just, it's not what it once was in stores because of online shopping. And my wife and her, and I guess my mother-in-law is who she is, they used to always get so excited about going Black Friday shopping and dealing with all the lunatics, which, I mean, I don't understand the excitement in that, but that's not for me to judge, I suppose. But even they have said they can actually see it for themselves before ever reading any articles or seeing any data. They said there's just not the same buzz anymore. You walk into the store and you're not sure if it's just a Saturday or if it's Black Friday. And that's all attributed to online sales. And this article was actually written in May, but again, I read two separate ones in December that are telling you that 20 to 25% of US malls will be closed in the next 5 years, which is, that's a really, really bold thing to say. But statistics are showing that that's going to be the case. So does your community have a mall? Well, that mall could very likely be closed in the next 5 years. There's, a pretty good chance of it, actually. And the reason behind that is big box stores, just the way a mall structured, which I didn't know this, honestly, and maybe it's sad I didn't until I started researching more of it, but they have anchor stores, which your anchor stores are Dillard's, JCPenney, Sears and Macy's, which just those anchor stores that I named alone, look how many stores they've closed. With Sears, obviously, just really going in the wrong direction. Macy's closed off a bunch of stores last year. As those stores close, the space within the mall gets less valuable because those were the driving force to people coming into your mall. So now all the small guys within that store, they really don't have as valuable space being in that mall, and they're paying a premium to be in that mall. Now this mall is getting less traffic. This mall is going to end up shutting down. All of those businesses, doesn't mean they went out of business. It means, well, this building went out of business. So I have to find somewhere new to take my business. And that's something that everyone on this call, if you've got a mall in your town, you might need to prepare for that and be able to help people relocate because they're going to need somewhere to do business. And think creatively about what to do with that giant concrete jungle that was a mall. I don't know what that might be. Maybe it's a business incubator. I don't know, but it's 1 in 5 and as bad as 1 in 4 are going to shut down in the next 5 years. So future assumptions and solutions. This is an optimistic view of when our jobs get taken over by technology. A good example of this, if we're talking about autonomous vehicles, well, I used to make vehicles that are driven by human beings. Now I make vehicles that are driven by machines. Yeah, that's a nice carryover there. Just like we went from the wagon to the regular car. Yeah, those jobs will, though you'll need to learn new skills, those jobs should carry over into more jobs that look the same. And there's also hope that humans will move to higher level of work. So we'll just, instead of being the toll booth operator, we'll be the person that works on the machine that now is the toll booth operator. The only problems with that are, the most realistic problem is you don't need as many people to do that. One, just like we talked about in Walmart, one person can look over 10 machines instead of needing 10 people to look over each machine. And then secondly, people are very reluctant to learn new skills. There have been lots of studies on that, and people don't want to learn something new. They simply want to do things the way they've always done it. That the attitude of let's be great, let's do what we've always done is kind of most people. And rather than say this won't happen to my community, it's probably better, you'd probably be serving your community better that you prepare for these things, because optimism is just a lack of information, which this has nothing to do with the presentation. But if you look at this picture close enough, I noticed this like a half hour ago as I was clicking through everything and refreshing myself on this topic. This person has 6 fingers, which is kind of hilarious. Like, I'm like, I don't know why. And then they have some kind of like mechanical crab claw arm. But again, that has nothing to do with it. I thought you might just find that humorous in this, very widely circulated, I guess, meme that's used. So optimism, it's just lack of information. Let's make sure we have all the information and prepare for just worst case scenarios. Because a lot of people in your community are going to be left looking for a job because of technology. The second reason we should focus more on small business, and number 2, and who does number 2 work for? If you are an Austin Powers fan, this might be kind of funny to you. If you've never seen Austin Powers, then that won't make any sense to you. And please let's stay with me with the rest of the presentation. So is honestly we're due for one. We had a pretty bad recession in the 80s. The 90s were actually fairly clean. We got a little lucky in the 90s, but right at the turn of the century in 01, we had another dip in the economy. And then we all are obviously very familiar with in 08, 09. One thing that we all have to realize is it's been 10 years since that last dip. And just if you look at it on a graph, we're kind of due for an economic downturn. So what do we do as economic developers during an economic downturn? Well, large businesses aren't creating jobs. They're not bringing in more business. They're not expanding. What are small businesses doing? Well, they're creating 100% of new jobs during an economic downturn. So over a span of 5 years, net new jobs were all based off of small businesses. That's a huge, that's the biggest number you can get. So yeah, that's really important. There were 4 years of job losses for big businesses during the 01 recession. And then 08, 09, it was even worse. I just don't have that updated data on the slide. And then small businesses only had a single year of job losses. So in terms of a 10-year snapshot, you know, maybe thinking like, yeah, that's just talking about the worst times. Well, that's why this is number 2 is economic downturn. But even if you include the 5 years prior to a downturn, which is when the economy is typically at its highest, which is another reason we should be a little scared right now, is we've got a strong economy. Still 93% of new jobs were due to small businesses, even when you include the 5 years prior, which is the best time for big business. So the downturn just cripples all the progress you make when the economy is good. And then if you're looking at a nice little chart like this, in terms of total job creation, you see, okay, Mark, you've already said this, small businesses create more jobs than big businesses, and I'm glad I'm drilling that into your head. But the most important part of this chart is if you look at the very end of it, in 2009, or 2008, 2009, obviously there was a drop off in jobs. You know, we all know that would hit us pretty hard, both small and big businesses. But in just a year, the small businesses have bounced back, and big businesses, though they're leveling off, are continuing to lose more jobs. And the same thing can be said with net job creation. So whether we're talking about total job creation or net job creation, small businesses bounce back to really almost a surplus in jobs within a year's period, where big businesses are taking half a decade. It's almost time for another recession by the time it gets better. So another thing worth looking at is the survival rates of establishments. So this is your typical survival rate: 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, and 5 year. If you've ever heard the statistic, like 20% of small businesses fail in their first 5 years or something like that, that's not exactly true, because if we're looking at small businesses between 2004 and 2010, about half of them were surviving at that 5 year point. So doing decent for themselves, but there's obviously some runoff that's got to be included for when they failed at 1 year and 2 year and 3 year. But what the point of this is, you're seeing how many made it their first year in each individual year. And in 07 and 09, the number was almost exact. So in the year before recession and the year after, following the recession, whatever you want to say, the chances of a small business prospering were exactly the same. And in 08, which was the bottom of the bottom, their chances of surviving 5 years was only a couple percentage points lower. So where you were looking at 80 in 07 and 09, you're looking at like 76 in 08. That's fantastic news. That means that even during an economic recession, there's not really much more likelihood that a small business is going to make it or not make it. In large business, that scale would look atrocious. So first point, technology is taking jobs. Second point, economic uncertainty is ahead, and it always will be looming. Let's plan for economic uncertainty, and small businesses are our best bet during that. And then we've got point 3 here, and highlighted by the greatest 3-point shooter of all time for the Golden State Warriors, Steph Curry here. And if you don't know anything about sports, then I'm sorry, I'm trying as hard as I can here to make a PowerPoint/webinar entertaining. But the third point is communities. If you couldn't tell from my picture, I don't just take care of my skin. I actually am fairly young, and now I've been wrapped into the millennial group. Before I used to talk about the millennials, then I was told I became one. So now I think the millennials are the greatest thing since sliced bread. But your community is important, especially to millennials. Previous generations, they said, where's a job available? That's where I'm moving. So if my plant was closing down, but they were doing an expansion in Siberia, I went home and I said, honey, we're moving to Siberia, bring your parka. And we went to where that job was located. Something happened. There was a shift that people said, you know what, I'm gonna, work to live, not live to work. And millennials are kind of the ones that are proud of it and saying, I don't really care what anyone's perception of that is. That's the way we're going to live our lives. And they're actually choosing where they'd like to live and then figuring out where they're going to work once they get there, which that's even scary to me, but that's the trend that we're going. And where I live, in the Nashville area, almost 100 people are moving to Nashville every day. And there aren't 100 jobs being created every day. I mean, I haven't seen the metrics, but that would be hard to believe if there were. So people are just moving here, and then maybe they're trying to make it in music, or maybe they're Nashville landed today. It was announced that we're in the bottom 20 or top 20 to land at Amazon 50,000 jobs. So I guess that will help with the 100 people moving here. But the point is that they're choosing where they want to live before they're ever looking for a job. So as economic developers, well, we've got to get a labor force here. As you know, a labor force is important to anyone deciding to come into your community. How do we get the labor force here? We make our community one that people in their 30s, people in their 40s soon will want to live in. So proof of this is things like Yelp. If we're talking about small businesses, I know when I go to any community, I get on Yelp and I figure out, where to find the best burger. And not once in the history of the millions of data points in Yelp has anyone ever looked at McDonald's and looked at Burger King and said, hey, which burger's better? That doesn't even make any sense to do. They're going to go in and they're going to say, which local joint has the best food? Which local joint has the most dependable person to work on my HVAC unit or to work on my car? They want to know the local business to eat at, to do all the things that just make it feel homey and not just these big box type areas. So secondly, money that's spent on local businesses and the mom and pop shop in your community stays in your community. So if we have this fictional $100 bill here and we're going to spend this within our community, there were 2 separate studies that talked about what happens to that $100 once it's spent. And when it's spent on a local independent person, 68 of those dollars, there's a direct impact on your community. And then only 43 of the $100 from a chain competitor. So if we're talking about those burger places, $68 out of that 100 for mom and pop's burger goes back to the community, where only $43 for McDonald's stays. And then to take that even further with secondary spending, that 45 of those $100 are then reinvested. So for the second time, to whereas with big box chains, just $14. So the point is, when you bring in, larger chain type organizations or, bigger companies, that money is being shipped to somebody else's community. Unless you're the headquarter, that there's really no economic impact for your particular community. And then secondly, small business owners tend to live close to their businesses. So they live typically within 10 minutes of where their business is located at. And I say that because it's not the same with large business. Typically with a large business, if I'm the CEO of whatever company you've brought into your town, it's unlikely I even live in your town. And my management, it's unlikely I live in your town. I might live a half hour away or an hour away even. An hour is not a stretch for anybody to be their daily commute. Towards a small business owner, I know I'm going to need to be there at weird hours. I'm going to have to, really tend to my business and nurture it more. I'm going to live more close by. So we were talking about a tax base is part of our job. When it's a small business owner, you're getting the taxes, yes, on that, building that they're leasing or that they bought. And secondly, you're getting it from the house that they live in, and they're eating in your community, they're shopping in your community, because this is their home and not just somewhere that they work at. So it's super important. I mean, I don't think that's a stretch of anyone's imagination to say it's way more important the community is to somebody who has a business in your community than someone who just works in your community. And go to an airport on Monday morning, you'll see how many people actually fly to their jobs, and that those dollars aren't even coming to the same region that they live and work in, because they live states away from where they work. And it's just something that technology has allowed us to do now. And then we talked about now the importance of technology, economic recession, and how small businesses survive, building a community and why it's important to them. So what are the next steps you can do to kind of help the small businesses? Well, you can foster entrepreneurship. 5.8 small businesses employ 1 to 500 people and created 58 million jobs out of 121. So entrepreneurs are who we need to be seeking out and taking care of and helping them grow. It's extremely important to every person on this phone in their community. But the second thing here is a little alarming. Startup activity is below Great Recession levels, and startups with employees are in a long-term decline. So, I mean, the millennial generation is supposed to be the creative generation, right? They're supposed to be the ones out there, doing new things. All this technology got created. I thought they're the ones starting businesses, but I mean, according to the Kauffman Foundation, they are absolutely not. Which, why? We look at the startup density here, and it's dropping steadily. And we look at the age of entrepreneurs, and back in 1996, just the mid 90s, who would have been the quote unquote millennial back then, the 20 to 34-year-old, only 34% of that group starting small businesses. And then of the oldest group, just 14% were the startups. And then, it's a slide from there with the age and the startup density. So it's like, well, that makes sense. That's where it should be. But if you look at current times, so this was 2015, basically 25% across the board of startups fell into different age groups, which for the end part of this, it might be due to retirement. Either somebody was able to retire and they don't want to have nothing to do, but the more likely cause is that they retired from their jobs and it's still not enough income to be able to keep up with cost of living these days. Didn't have enough in their retirement. So they've had to start a business just to be able to work because nobody wanted to hire their 64-year-old self, which is sad in its own part. So they've started their own businesses. But why are millennials, the 20 to 34-year-old, why are they not starting businesses? And if this is something that's, it's the data doesn't lie, but why is what we have to get down to. And I'll tell you, there's a couple reasons why. And one of them being the cost of education. So the total cost of education on average in 1996 was only $52,000, which, that's a lot of money, but, that's about $10,000 a year, $12,000 per year to get your full bachelor's degree. Staggering is the current number. $131,000 is the average cost of tuition of education. That's insane. With the average today, the average student having more than $50,000 worth of student debt. That's the reason that millennials are not starting small businesses, is because they quite literally can't afford to. Because what bank is going to give you a loan when you have no assets and all you have is a ton of debt? The second thing is kids. There's a real choice having to be made now. Do I have kids or do I open a small business? And to whereas you used to be able to do both, you can't any longer. It's too expensive to be able to have both. And some would argue it's too expensive just to have kids. They're very expensive. They eat a lot. I have a 2-year-old and she won't stop eating. I'm like, but you're just 2. Anyway, that's besides the point. She's a sore spot for me. But you see that the average cost to start a small business, $49,000, which, okay, if we got rid of that $50,000 student loans, guess what? Now I could get a $50,000 small business loan, and I could actually affect the economy and grow potentially jobs in my community, because I'm probably going to hire one person. I'm probably going to hire then 5 people, 10 people, and I can grow jobs in my community simply by not having student loan debt, is what it all boils down to. The second thing is immigration. If you look at immigration statistics, 13.7% of the U.S. population is foreign born, but 30% of entrepreneurs in the country as a whole are foreign born. So it's like, well, they only make up 13% of the population, but 30% of the total population's entrepreneurs are foreign born, with 45% of tech Fortune 500 companies being foreign born. So 1 in 2 of these startups in Silicon Valley or in technology, which we talked about as the future, are foreign born. Very important that we make sure that immigrants can come into our country to start these businesses, because the native citizens of the country are not the ones doing it. And as economic developers, we want to make sure that jobs are created, that money is being brought into our community. And does it matter who it's coming from? It's obviously important that immigrants are able to come to this country and help with our economy. And then if you look here, top 10 countries with the highest propensity for small business ownership, United States isn't even on there. So yeah, it's obviously super important that we grow more small business, because a country of our size really should have many more small businesses. Lastly, how can you help? We've given examples of what the problem is, what the future problems are, but how can I specifically help? Well, the first thing you can do is try to remove those barriers to entrepreneurship. So as economic developers, maybe you're not dabbling enough into politics, into policies that would reduce college costs and debt for people with kids to be able to start companies, and college graduates to be able to start companies. There's no denying that debt is really, really hindering people from being able to open a small business. But what can we do about it? I can speak just locally for me here in Tennessee. Last year or the year before, in the last 2 years, community college is now free. And it started out as just any high school graduate could immediately go and get 2 years community college on the taxpayer, not pay a dime for it. So that's great, right? If I went to a technical school, community college, whatever, I can now learn a skill and really go open a business pretty much immediately after that. And now I have zero debt, but I have these skills that people need and want, and I can make a direct impact into your community rather than kind of being a leech on it. I can start a business, increase that tax base. So the cost of education has gone tens of times more above inflation, and I don't know the reason for it. And I think it's something that we really need to dig into. And I think it's important that economic developers, that people in the chambers of commerce, that influencers in communities look into this and say, how can we help with this skyrocketing college education costs with somebody being $150,000 in debt with their arts degree or whatever it might be that you're really never going to be able to pay back. And then secondly, again, we're going to get involved into policy and politics that reverse policies that reduce immigration, because immigration is a good thing when it comes to local economics. And then if you want to do even more, so that's not a ton that you've been asked to do. That's simply just, be a person in the room when things are being voted on, propose some things. But if you want to, really commit to it, you could start an innovation center. A lot of communities are doing this and doing it with great success. You can have an economic gardening program. So economic gardening, whether it be virtual or an actual building, obviously very much helps entrepreneurship and grow small business. Everybody on this call can work more closely with their SBDC, that's Small Business Development Center, with their Chamber of Commerce, with their universities, to be able to help the small business owner before they're even a small business owner, help them be able to grow and turn into something with no strings attached, just simply because I know that's going to grow jobs and that's going to grow the tax base in my community. We already talked about pro-business legislation, both locally and nationally. Might not be popular with everybody, but if it's pro-business, we should certainly get behind it. And then after all this is done, we're back to being that great snapshot of the economic developer. Okay, I've been given all this advice of how to spend my time, but now my time is all being spent small business, and small business, which I'm not saying that's how you should be spending your time. Obviously, recruitment and bringing in more businesses is an important part of our jobs. So we can't spend all our time on small business. But if we look at all the things we have to do with big business and recruitment, which I don't have any slides on them, but there are tools that can help you with recruitment, and everyone on this call might be familiar with them, but Golden Shovel can certainly help you through having a better website. And there's tools that are out there that'll list all of the properties that you have in your community with demographics, with consumer exposure, with labor force, with businesses listed. And there's a few out there that do it, but who does it the best, in my opinion, is the GIS planning guys. So if you're looking for something to help you do your job with site selectors without even having to spend any of your time on it, I would certainly check out GIS planning and the Zoom Prospector Enterprises tool, because it will certainly be able to help you do your job without taking a minute of your time. And then on the small business side, if I can give just a couple minute plug, it's my presentation, so I'm going to. Tools like ours at Size Up are going to help you help small businesses with, again, not taking a single minute of your time from doing other things that you need to do. So on your website, you might have some passive engagement, which is, reading news articles, which is watching an informative video, giving steps of how to start a small business, how to write a business plan. Those are things that are valuable, but they tend to not draw people in because they require a lot more work than something that is active. And with that active engagement, you want to be able to enter information, get real-time feedback, modify information, get results based off what you're plugging in, update the information, and come back more often to help yourself. And that's something that Size Up does. So this is comparing in a CEB research study that I had no part in, or the company, but this is a totally private study that is being done for small business. It's showing that one thing that they need is help competing with big business. And something that big businesses have is data. Big businesses can afford, to hire a company, KPMG, to do big research studies for them and find out where their customers are and how to get those customers. Small businesses can absolutely not afford it. And you see that small businesses use business intelligence different ways than medium-sized companies, and that they need it much, much more. If you look at this consumption of business intelligence with open source data is all that small businesses typically can get because it's free a lot of the time, but they have no idea how to understand it. And large companies don't even mess with open source data because, again, they have the resources to be able to get their own data or to pay somebody to source data for them. So, this was a quote I just liked out of Intuit. Small business management will become less about gut instincts and more about analysis. So rather than saying, you know what, I have a feeling that this building on this corner is where I'm going to succeed, or that I should get into this industry, more and more they're going to use analysis and data and metrics. They just have to have access to this information, which is something that Size Up LBI provides. So just a couple slides on it. This is a tool that will go directly on your website, and it will be able to help small business owners do 4 different things. The first thing is they'll be able to benchmark themselves versus their competitors. So if we were talking in terms of a startup, they'd be able to put, working on their business plan, what I think I can make in a given year. And I've said here that I'm a beauty salon located in Fort Worth, Texas. What could I make in a given year? And what are others around me doing? So it would show me with a heat map and with these scales that an average Fort Worth or Tarrant County or Dallas metro area beauty salon is actually making closer to $200,000 per year in revenue. So I might be overshooting what I think is attainable. And if I was an existing businesses who, wants to know how I stand versus my competitors, it would show me I'm actually leading the pack almost. I'm doing better in terms of revenue than 82% of others in my industry. So there's all of this benchmarking metrics. So within the year you started to see, are more of these businesses opening each year? Are more of them closing? What's a fair wage to be paying my employees? How many employees should I have? What do others have? How cost effective am I? The revenue per capita, local turnover, healthcare costs, workers' compensation. And then it's giving you a metric saying, you know what, I'm ahead of the curve, I'm behind the curve, or I'm right at average in all these particular categories, industry specific and geographic specific, not just basic information. Secondly, it's going to give you advertising advice. Walmart can afford to advertise the entire country and then hope the right people see it. As a small business owner, you need to really narrow that down. You can only afford to advertise to a smaller market or to decide where you're going to locate at because you can't afford 10 locations. This is going to show you where the best places for you to possibly advertise or open a location might be. And it will even compare it with consumer expenditure information. So it's actually going to show you some leakage, to use an economic development term, that people are actually leaving areas they live to get a product or service need met in other areas. And there might be an opportunity for you to go in and put a billboard here or open a location there. And then thirdly, it's going to show you where all your potential customers are located. Put that on top of a map with where your competitors are located at. So, like, hey, I have potential business customers here. I have competitors located here. I have suppliers located here. And then it'll give me consumer expenditure patterns as well. And again, it's going to give me that information with a heat map showing me where the most people are spending your money. And for my customers, my business customers and suppliers, it's going to give me contact information as well. So what's their name? What's their address? What's their phone number? What's their website? How can I get a hold of these people? So it's giving me a clean lead list. And then lastly, it's going to give you demographic information. And rather than just total demographics, which, if you got on with, like, say you census information, that's all you used. A, that's very old data. It's 8 years old now. But B, it's just going to show you totals. And that's not that helpful to a small business. What is helpful is our tool, which is going to allow you to create a heat map of block group level data that's showing you where this particular demographic are located in. So if I identify my target market, now I can see basically the neighborhoods that are most densely populated by the people that I think I'm most likely to do business with. And you can also search that information around specific boundaries, crossing city and county lines, and you can type in specific addresses as well to get demographics, consumer expenditure, or labor force data. So no matter what the data a small business would need, what industry they're located in, what geographic location they're in, this tool is going to help them understand the next steps for their business, how to write a business plan, or what to put in their business plan, what to expect in their business, how to find customers without the economic developer actually having to do anything other than direct people to their own website. So this would be put right there on your website. Golden Shovel could easily do it just to plug them, and we'd get this thing up and running for you. So lastly, after everything we've learned today, economic development efforts that seek to improve the well-being and quality of life for a community by creating and or retaining jobs and growing incomes, therefore growing the tax base. Is that something you're doing every day? And if you are, small business has to be a part of it. So there's my contact information again. If you're just interested in any of the data I put in here, anything I talked about, or if you're interested, I hope you are interested in maybe taking a look at a demo specifically with Size Up LBI, I'd be happy to set that up with you. That's my email. That's my phone number. And I don't know if there were any questions, but if there were any questions, I would happily go ahead and answer them now. And I hope everyone was able to hear me. I just saw I was having some audio issues. So thank you, everybody. If you have any questions, please do feel free to email or call me. We'll talk soon.